In the last 6 months of World War II, one operation sank more ship tonnage than the United States submarine campaign and all strategic bombing combined. It cost 15 aircraft. Almost no one has heard of it. 4 engines, building from silence. We are inside a Boeing B-29 Super Fortress, looking out through the nose glazing at black water 5,000 feet below. The radar scope glows green. A coastline reads as a bright line. The navigator's hands moving across it, fixing the position. The bomb bay opens. Something falls. A parachute catches and the mine descends, silently, into the dark water of the Shimonoseki Strait. 80% of Japan's merchant fleet passed through here. 2 miles wide, 30 to 60 feet deep, the narrow gap between Kyushu and Honshu. If you could seal this strait, you could seal Japan. In the spring of 1945, the United States Army Air Forces tried to do exactly that, and largely succeeded. The story of how they did it, why it has been forgotten, and what it almost cost the world to not know about it sooner, that is the story of Operation Starvation. Japan in early 1945 is not simply a nation at war. It is an island empire that cannot breathe without constant infusion from the sea. 90% of its oil arrives by ship, 88% of its iron, 24% of its coal, 20% of its food. Every factory in Japan, every warship, every rifle depends on a chain of vessels moving through open water. And that chain, by 1945, is nearly broken. The United States submarine campaign has spent 3 years hunting Japan's deep-water oceanic routes, and by late 1944, it has largely succeeded. The great shipping lanes from Southeast Asia, from the Dutch East Indies, from the oil fields of Borneo. Those arteries are severed, or nearly so. What remains is the coastal network, the inland sea, the Korea Strait, the narrow passages between the home islands themselves. These are the capillaries, the inner routes still carrying what little enters the country at all, feeding the factories and the cities and the people. They are shallower than the open ocean, closer to land, running through the choke points that make Japan's geography both its identity and, now, its liability. One choke point matters more than any other. The Shimonoseki Strait, a 2-mile gap between Kyushu and Honshu, carries 4/5 of Japan's merchant traffic. It is considered, in the intelligence assessments of 1944, the single most vulnerable point in Japan's entire shipping position. Seal the Shimonoseki Strait and the last major artery is severed. The question is whether anyone can actually do it, and whether they are willing to try. For the better part of a year, the answer is no. And the reason has nothing to do with Japan. From mid-1944, the United States Navy is pressing for B-29 superfortresses to lay naval mines in Japan's home waters. The Navy understands the logic. The shallow inner seas are ideal mine territory. Submarines cannot operate there safely, and the B-29 is the only aircraft that can reach those waters from the Mariana Islands. General Henry Arnold, commanding the Army Air Forces, is unconvinced. Strategic bombing, precision application of air power against industrial targets, is the foundational doctrine of everything Arnold's service believes about itself. Mining feels like a concession to sea power thinking. It feels, to the men who built the AAF around the strategic bomber, like giving the B-29 away to do the Navy's work. The argument runs through the second half of 1944. Arnold resists. The Navy, led by Admiral Chester Nimitz, 5 stars, silver-haired, the man who has been running the Pacific War since the day after Pearl Harbor, insists. Nimitz understands that his surface and submarine campaigns are reaching their limits. He needs the inner waters blocked. In November 1944, Arnold gives way, but only partially. A mining operation will happen, eventually, when sufficient aircraft are available. The man who breaks the deadlock arrives in January 1945. General Curtis LeMay is 38 years old when he replaces General Haywood Hansell as commander of the 21st Bomber Command. He is compact and broad-shouldered, with a heavy jaw and a permanent scowl. Not anger, but Bell's palsy, a partial facial paralysis that makes a full smile nearly impossible. There is almost always a cigar. His crews have already given him a nickname, Iron Ass. It is not affectionate exactly. It is the word men use for someone who demands what seems impossible and will not hear why it cannot be done. He finds a bombing campaign that is dropping its bombs near their targets 5% of the time. The precision doctrine, the European tactics, the daylight high-altitude raids, is not working against Japan. The weather is wrong. The jet stream at altitude scatters the bombs. The Japanese air defenses are calibrated for exactly the kind of attacks they are receiving. Within weeks, LeMay has discarded the doctrine, shifted to low-altitude night incendiary raids, and begun burning Japan's cities in a way the precision campaign never could. And then, within 6 days of taking command, he writes to Washington, not to ask permission, to describe what he plans to do. He will assign the 313th Bombardment Wing at Tinian to mine Japan's coastal waters. The entire wing, 4 groups, approximately 160 aircraft. Arnold had suggested a single group. LeMay assigns 4 times that. That decision, made in a letter within 6 days of landing in theater, is the decision that makes every number that follows possible. The 313th Bombardment Wing's home is Northfield, Tinian, the largest air base complex in the world, built on an island the size of Manhattan in the 15 months since American Marines took it from Japan at significant cost. The island smells permanently of aviation fuel. The coral tarmac of the flight line stretches to the horizon. At night, the tropical air is warm, 75 degrees, a steady northeast breeze off the water, carrying salt across the flight lines where B-29s sit in the darkness like enormous silver animals. Navy mine specialists arrive on January 19th, 1945. In exactly 1 month, they have Mine Assembly Depot No. 4 built and operational in the island's interior. 12 officers and 171 enlisted men. They work around the clock. The mines that come through their hands are complex machines, cylindrical, weighing up to 2,000 pounds, fitted with acoustic and magnetic fusing systems that can be configured in up to 200 different combinations of delayed arming and ship count triggers. A mine might be set to arm on the first ship, or the 5th, or the 20th. The Japanese will not be able to know. A swept channel is not a safe channel. That is the point. By late February, 1,500 modified mines are stockpiled and ready. Crews train through February, 4 to 8 flights each, 5 radar approaches per flight, dummy drops on the last run. They learn to navigate by the AN/APQ-13 radar, reading the bright green line of a coastline to fix their position over water at night, releasing at the computed drop point with enough precision to place a mine within a ship channel they cannot see. They are briefed in the late afternoon. They eat, they sleep if they can. They are woken before midnight. They taxi out before dawn, the sound of 4 Wright R3350 engines per aircraft rising across the island, 18 cylinders each, producing 2,200 horsepower, until Northfield is all thunder. On the night of March 27, 1945, Brigadier General John Davies is at the controls of the lead B-29. He is the wing commander. He could have sent someone else. He doesn't. His aircraft is not carrying incendiary bombs. Each of his B-29s carries a dozen large naval mines, something the doctrine of his own service says is not the Air Force's mission. His chain of command above LeMay is skeptical. He goes anyway, heading northwest into the dark, 5,000 feet above the water, his radar scope showing the coastline of Japan as a bright curve of green light. The bomb bay opens at the computed release point. The mines fall, the parachutes catch. One by one, they slip below the surface of the Shimonoseki Strait and settle into the silt bottom, 825 of them on this first night, armed and waiting. The Japanese react almost immediately, scrambling minesweepers that are already outpaced before they begin. LeMay orders a minimum of 2,000 additional mines sown in April alone, keeping the fields replenished faster than they can be cleared. But the campaign has already done something no one planned for. 9 days after the first mining missions, Japan's super battleship Yamato prepares to sortie. The Yamato is the largest and most heavily armed warship ever built. 70,000 tons, 18-inch guns, the supreme symbol of Japanese naval power. Its mission is a one-way run to Okinawa, where it will beach itself and fight as a fixed battery until it is destroyed. The Shimonoseki Strait is its normal route out of the inland sea. That route is now closed, sealed by mines laid by B-29s that were aiming at cargo ships. The Yamato is forced through the Bungo Strait instead, out into the open Pacific. American carrier aircraft find it there on April 7th. They attack in successive waves. The Yamato, struck by at least 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs, capsizes and explodes. Of its crew of 3,000, fewer than 300 survive. The planners of Operation Starvation wanted to throttle imports. They incidentally helped sink the most famous warship in the Japanese fleet. Through late April and into May, the numbers through the Shimonoseki Strait begin their decline. 70,000 tons per day in March, 35,000 in April. The strait that carried 4/5 of Japan's merchant traffic is becoming something else. A barrier, a dead zone, a place where ships wait on the outer side and do not move. Phase 2 of the campaign targets the industrial core. Kobe, Osaka, Tokyo, the great port cities of the inner sea, the places where the raw materials that still reach Japan are offloaded and distributed. Nearly 200 aircraft drop more than 1,400 mines into the approaches of these ports. Kobe, Japan's premier shipping hub, had been handling 320,000 tons of cargo in March. By July, it handles 44,000. An 85% collapse, measured in the goods that do not arrive and the ships that do not sail, and the factories that go quiet, waiting for coal that is sitting in a hold offshore because no crew will move through a mined harbor. In the Kanman Strait in May alone, in 1 month, in one waterway, 113 ships are sunk. The American submarine campaign had been the centerpiece of Allied anti-shipping strategy for 3 years, the most sustained, costly, and celebrated effort to cut Japan's supply lines in the entire Pacific War. In May 1945, in the Kanmon Strait, the mines from 160 B-29s that had not even been assigned this mission 18 months earlier quietly exceeded what the submarines destroyed in the same period. Phase 3 extends the reach. Northwest Honshu, Kyushu, the sea lanes to Korea and the Asian mainland. Phase 4 intensifies. In June, the 313th drops 3,542 mines in a single month. The Shimonoseki Strait, which carried 70,000 tons per day in March, carries 7,500 in May and 1,750 in June. Ships back up in outer anchorages, waiting for clearances that never come or come too late. Coal meant for Osaka's steel mills sits in holds. Food meant for the cities rots on the water or simply never arrives. Cranes stand idle on the piers that were once frantic with loading. The country is consuming itself. Japan did not see this coming, and the reason tells its own story about how wars are actually won. The United States had rarely used aerial mining before Operation Starvation. Japan had, accordingly, placed little emphasis on mine-sweeping capability. When the campaign begins in March 1945, Japanese minesweepers are few, under-equipped, and trained for a threat nobody had prepared for. Now they face not just a minefield, but a minefield that cannot be certified safe. Those 200 fusing combinations mean that a swept channel might still hold a mine set to arm on the 10th ship through, or the 30th. The Japanese can clear a route and call it open. The next ship that passes might prove them wrong. Commander Tadao Kuwahara, a Japanese shipping officer, will tell Allied investigators after the war that it had become difficult to obtain crews, that there was a great tendency for crews to jump ship. The men who have survived one passage through a mined harbor are not eager to attempt a second. The ship's queue. Japanese ports are paralyzed for 5 to 10 days at a time while minesweeping is attempted, and when a channel is finally certified clear and a ship finally moves, the next mine in the channel triggers and the paralysis begins again. Behind the shipping figures, the civilian numbers are beginning to look like something else entirely. By the summer of 1945, civilian rations in Japan are running 16% below subsistence level. There is no sugar. Japan had depended on outside supply for 80% of its consumption, and none has arrived since March. The rice crop is the worst since 1910. The diseases of malnutrition are spreading: dysentery, beriberi, tuberculosis. Allied analysts studying the trajectory of the blockade estimate that up to 10 million Japanese will die of starvation by February 1946 if the war continues and the mines keep working. 10 million people. That number has almost no place in popular accounts of how the Pacific War ended. In May 1945, a fifth group joins the 313th Bombardment Wing at Tinian. They are assigned to the same wing, fly the same B-29s, operate from the same island. They are called the 509th Composite Group. They train separately, brief separately, and their missions are not discussed with the other crews. The mines continue to fall through June and July. Phase 5 extends the campaign to Korean ports, closes Niigata and Moji, remines every route that has shown signs of recovering. By late July, 35 of Japan's 47 essential convoy routes have been abandoned. The maritime economy of the home islands is, in any practical sense, dead, and the 509th is preparing something else entirely. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 from the 509th Composite Group, flying from North Field, Tinian, drops a single weapon over Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second aircraft drops a second weapon over Nagasaki. Japan announces its surrender on August 15, 1945. Operation Starvation ends on the same day. Not because the mines stopped working, but because Japan stopped. Now the final accounting: 670 ships sunk or damaged, 1,251,000 tons of known losses, over 12,000 mines deployed, 35 of 47 convoy routes abandoned, a 98% reduction in traffic through the Shimonoseki Strait, from 70,000 tons per day to 1,500. The Kobe shipping collapse, 85%. The entire campaign from March 27th to August 15th. 15 American aircraft lost. Against the near-complete destruction of Japan's coastal supply network. Against a rate of shipping losses that, in the final months of the war, exceeded submarines and strategic bombing combined. The 10 million people projected to die of starvation by February 1946. They lived. The war ended in August. Mines laid in Japanese waters during Operation Starvation are still being found and cleared years after the war ends. The fields do not simply go away. The atomic bombs were dropped from the same wing, flying from the same island in the same aircraft type, by men trained in the same B-29s. When the bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they became, immediately and permanently, the defining narrative of the Pacific War's final act. Every American learns those names. Every American learns those dates. The 313th Bombardment Wing's 5-month mining campaign sank more tonnage than the submarine war. It reduced Japan's most vital waterway to 2% of its former capacity. It is a footnote in most histories of how the war ended. The atomic bombs didn't just end the war, they ended the story. And both came from the same island. In the years after the war, Allied investigators interviewed the officers who had run Japan's response to the mining campaign. The commander of Japan's mine-sweeping operations, the man who had spent 5 months failing to stop Operation Starvation, gave an assessment that has appeared in almost no popular account of the Pacific War's end. He said that he believed the mining campaign, had it been launched earlier, could have led directly to Japan's defeat. Not an American general, not a post-war analyst. The man on the other side, the man who watched it work, the man who could not stop it. The Shimonoseki Strait is 2 miles wide. On a clear day, you can see from one shore to the other. The water is still now, has been for 80 years. Below the surface, somewhere in the silt, there may yet be mines that nobody found.